Okay, welcome to another session of Across the Pond with George Kazolias and James White. Uh, Willkommen, bienvenue, George.
I'm happy to be back again this week.
Thank you. Uh, the first topic that comes to mind for me is the psychological operations that are being conducted, the information war age that we live in. Um, I find that the government is exploiting this use of psychological operations to more or less brainwash the public into certain points of view, and this is being amplified by the media. That leads us into our events of the week. First up is the UN vote. Let's hear your thoughts, George, on the UN vote that happened this week, the sort of denunciation of Russia. However, let you characterize it.
Well, anybody who's interested in more in-depth analysis can go to my website, Kazolias.com, and see my latest blog post. I don't think this vote means anything. It reminds me of the coalition of the willing that justified the invasion of Iraq, the occupation of Afghanistan, the attack against Serbia, the destruction of Libya, all of these things that the coalition of the willing approved, which proved to be disastrous, not only for the countries attacked, not only for the regions in which the countries are, but also for the world. The Middle East is in complete turmoil, much of Asia. The destruction of Libya has destabilized Africa all the way down to Mozambique. It's just insane that these people will repeat the same mistakes over and over and over again at the UN in this so-called coalition of the willing, because they're masters. And I use the word imperialist, and this sort of bothers my left-wing buddies because it's 1970s stuff. But what are you going to call countries like France and Germany and the United States and Britain who bully, threaten, use economic sanctions, economic pressure, even pull off coups d'etats to force governments to do their bidding, basically? And this is what happens in the UN. I mean, what does Tonga and Costa Rica count for compared to India and China and South Africa and the others who voted against? I'll just wrap up real quickly because people can go to my blog for more.
Sure.
If you take the countries that did not vote this German resolution, you have over half the world's population and probably half the world's GDP. So we need to really, really take a back step. I know they're going to use this vote to prove the world is with us, but the world is not with them. Europe and the United States are with them, and we're talking to our public opinion because we don't have to convince Indians. We don't have to convince South Africans. We have to convince our people that they're being lied to.
Absolutely. Well, I'm so tired of Biden. First of all, he'll act as if he represents everybody in the U.S., which, I mean, he represents about 40% of the people are really in favor of what Biden is doing. And then he gets on the world stage and says that he's representing the whole world. And I mean, this is just a complete fabrication. There's no basis to this at all, and that's the tragedy of the UN vote, is that people are going to actually think that the world is behind this, when the reality is, as you just said, is something quite different. Well, I don't think this UN vote is going to have a lasting impact. I think that it's people have short attention spans, and this will be quickly forgotten. I think what people are, the realization is coming to people that, okay, this Ukraine war has been going on for a year now, and for the entire year we've been hearing that Ukraine is winning this thing, and all they need is a few more hand grenades, and that'll put them over the top. The reality on the ground is quite different. This war, the reality of this war is the human tragedy of the probably when all is said and done, there'll be probably about 1 million dead Ukrainians, and a large, maybe a smaller number, but also a large number of Russians. And that doesn't even mention the civilians. So this is just it was a war that never should have been fought. It was suicidal for Zelensky to make the choice to engage Russia in a military, in a shooting war. But simultaneously with the shooting war is this propaganda war. So, these two, the shooting war and the propaganda war are sort of moving simultaneously and often in disparate directions. So again, the UN vote, it gives credence to Biden's misrepresentation that the whole world is in favor of what he wants, and that's just not the case. And speaking of Joe Biden, his wife, Dr. Jill, says that he's now running in 2024. Of course, he hasn't made the announcement, but she has. So I want to say about that, despite the disaster that has been the Biden regime and its conduct, there's always a huge Democrat advantage coming out of the gate. The Democrats have the state of California, the state of New York, and all the northeastern states are in the bag for the Democrats as soon as the votes start to be counted. They have the advantage of the DC establishment, which is powerful and formidable, and also the inherent bias of the media to promote the Democrat candidate and tear down the Republican candidate. So, as bad as Joe Biden has been, I would say right now he's the front runner. And unless the Republicans get their act together, he's likely to get another 4 years. As much of a disaster as, I mean, it's going to take us 10 years to get out of what he's done to us in 4 years. So I just don't see how we can bear another 4 years of this guy. But I think right now it's more likely than not that that's what we're going to get.
Well, you brought up a lot of subjects there, but maybe I'll just touch on the last. I think that if the Democrats choose Joe Biden to run again next year, it shows the bankruptcy of the Democratic Party, that they don't have anybody to propose. I personally don't believe that's going to happen. I just don't see Joe Biden running again. I have no idea who they're going to propose. Much of what you're saying just reaffirms my conviction that we need a new constitution and do away with a presidential monarchical regime and set up some sort of parliamentary democracy where the different voices of the people of the United States are expressed and represented, which we don't have today. We don't have a real representative democracy. We have whichever party, we just have people who are sold out to the major economic interests. I mean, just explain to me how the average wealth of a member of Congress is $8 million. Where did that money come from? How did they all become millionaires? Think about it. And then the revolving doors and all the rest. So yeah, it just convinces me that we need a new constitution. But considering next year, I don't totally agree with you that Joe Biden, I just can't see him being a candidate, even if they don't have anybody else to run. But of course, Kamala Harris is such a disaster that it would be suicidal for them to run. Frankly, just like, and I'll wrap up there, just like in 2020, where, I'm convinced Mickey Mouse could have won against Donald Trump. I'm convinced that I'm convinced that anybody who runs against Joe Biden next year will win. So that's why it would be suicidal for the Democrats to put him forward. But who? That's the big question.
If it's Trump, I think Biden will win again because they'll pull out the same bag of dirty tricks. They'll do all the same stuff that they did in 2020, and Trump will lose again. So, I mean, the Republicans really need to get their act together. They do have viable candidates. Uh, remember that when Joe Biden was running from his basement in 2020, I mean, he couldn't win. He lost a string of the early primaries badly. I mean, he was coming in fourth and fifth. Okay, it was only when James Clyburn, okay, pulled his manhood out of the fire and got African Americans to vote for him in the state of South Carolina, the tiny state of South Carolina, that the whole world shifted, and every Democrat got behind Biden instantly. So I just want to say finally about this: unity always beats disunity, and as as bad a president as Joe Biden has been, the Democrats at least are unified, and the Republicans are running off in a million different directions. There's a great deal of debate. I mean, I think that's healthy. What you're describing as a solution is pretty much the kind of democracy that exists in Europe, right? I mean, where
Well,
you've got a
it's in several countries, yes. I would say Germany, Italy. There are several countries which we do have this kind of, Denmark, for example, or Sweden, do have this kind of representative democracy, which gives minority points of view a voice and representation. Because as we said last week, democracy is an exercise in compromise. But as I also said last week, I haven't lost all hope that both the Democrats and the Republicans will implode, and that new currents or new parties might come out of this that will destroy what you call this binary party.
well, the uniparty. I mean, a lot of people would call it, but
Uniparty,
uh,
sorry.
I mean, the interests are so entrenched. I mean, that's part of what I see as the problem here is that as awful a president as Biden, I mean, every decision he's made, the open border, he's destroyed the world economy, not just the U.S. He's really disrupted the whole world economy. I mean, there's hyperinflation around the globe right now. There's the embarrassment of Afghanistan, and now we've got Ukraine on our hands. So yeah, it's going to take us 10 years to undo this. But as far as I can see, the people who the coalition of the Greens, who by the way are also quite happy that as Victoria Nuland stated, that the pipeline is lying as a heap of metal on the bottom of the sea. I think the Greens are in favor of that too. I think they want these outrageously high gas prices. They don't care about inflation. They've got their climate crusade, and the hell with everything else. So
Yeah,
they're in favor of what he's doing, and more importantly, the moneyed interests are behind him. And I would say that they're getting what they paid for to having installed Joe Biden.
well, this is a very complicated subject because there are Greens and Greens on different issues, and the Greens in France are not like the Greens in Germany, who are not like the Greens in the United States. For example, in Germany, the Greens are totally Zionist, pro-Israel, no matter how many Palestinians they kill, which is not the case of the Greens in the United States. So it's a lot more. I think it's a lot more intricate and complicated. As far as the gas goes in the Nord Stream pipeline, I understand what your reasoning is, and that would make sense that they're glad there's less gas going to Germany. The Germans are not so happy about that. And you're right that the ecologist movement doesn't really talk about the economy. I mean, apparently they don't care if hundreds of thousands of people get laid off and have no revenue, if it shutting down factories, if it reduces the energy thing, when what we should be doing, I believe, I'm not a scientist, is investing in new energies. We're doing research and yeah, we should maybe change a lot of things in the way we live. We're too much into consumerism, too much into a consumer society. There's a lot of things we don't have to produce. Maybe we can do things better, differently. But we should be investing in research to replace the kind of fossil fuels we're using, rather than just shutting down the economy and putting and risking the idea that you can put hundreds of thousands of people in the street.
Right. Well, I think that there's plenty of research going on, and people are seriously trying to transition. Uh, but the way this was done for Biden to have taken office and immediately canceled the pipeline, he signaled to all the oil companies that he was going to punish them for exploration and production, and so they shut it down.
Well, let me give
Uh,
you one example of how catering to the Greens can practically destroy a country. When Macron wanted to make the Greens happy by imposing a tax on diesel for cars, now poor working people who earn the minimum wage have diesel cars in France, and he did away with the wealth tax at the same time. We didn't talk about it, but perception is important. The president of the rich, and then you had the yellow vest movement, which practically brought France to its knees. Macron was on the verge of declaring martial law. We are in a permanent state of emergency. He was on the verge of declaring martial law. It was so bad. That's what catering to the Greens can do. And one hopes that from Macron's experience in 2017, 2018, until 2019, that he learned his lesson. I mean, they hurt people. They use the
right.
they can't quell the disruptions in the banlieue, in the immigrant suburbs, but they can definitely clobber hardworking, lower income families.
Well, speaking of pandering, there is the spectacle of the two speeches this week, one from Biden, or a couple from Biden, I guess, and one from Putin. And the contrast to me is quite interesting. It says a lot about those two people. It says a lot about the interests they represent. I want to say, though, that the Ukraine war promotion is getting fatigued because a year has passed now. Okay, we're getting there's a sea of yellow and blue on the news of all the people sobbing about and I mean I don't mean to downplay the tragedy. It's an atrocity what's happening there. But I've noticed that the oft-stated "as long as it takes" trope is being walked back a little bit now. And it's softening to where it's going to be like, well, yeah, as long as it takes until the money runs out.
Or the men run out.
Well, and that's the real bottom line. But okay, so then you have this Lindsey Graham and Boris Johnson combined on an opinion piece in the Wall Street Journal, pushing for fighter jets and effectively an escalation of the war. I can't believe the madness that has taken over the world, that people really want to do this saber rattling with nuclear weapons. I mean, I thought we got over that 20 or 30 years ago, but these people seem to want to go right back into that. And I mean, it's just the essence of irresponsibility to go down that road. But let's let you talk about what you saw out of Biden's speeches this week and what you saw from Putin.
I think Biden's not dealing with a full deck, to tell you the truth, when he's describing a reality that doesn't exist at all. There is no way Ukraine can win this war. And I will add that there is no way that Russia can lose this war. Russia cannot lose this war. It is existential for Russia, and they will do what they have to win. But they don't have to go nuclear to win this war. Biden's idea that you're sending equipment to the Ukrainians is ridiculous. The idea that the Russians are suffering horrible losses is just a counter-verity, a counter-truth. If you look at the Ukrainian offensives of September and October, they were meant to create public opinion when Congress was voting for new aid to Ukraine. So they needed to show a dynamic. Ukraine is winning. Ukraine is advancing. Ukraine was losing 8 to 10 men for every Russian casualty in those needless, useless, stupid offensive. And the
Right.
Russians pulled off a textbook withdrawal from Kherson. They pulled out 30,000 men and 2,000 vehicles with a minimum of losses from Kherson. I mean,
Oh,
everything the Russians are doing is textbook, and it's to perfection.
okay. Well, let me say about Putin then. Putin is underrated as a military strategist. This is a guy who started out in life as a KGB officer, in effect, a police officer. Nobody has a clearer idea of the frailty and weakness of human nature than a cop on the beat. So he's got that understanding of people, which very few people at his level in government have. He's also an accomplished judo fighter, and I think his mastery of foreign policy is he's kind of a chess master, and so I think he's a really formidable foe, and I think his ability as a military commander is vastly underrated. Um,
It's very interesting what you're saying there, because he's not catering. Okay, he's got a problem. When wars drag on, public opinion tends to drift away, and so he needs to win this war. But at the same time, he is not submitting to public opinion by doing crazy things in Ukraine that would be very costly to his men. He has a clear idea of what his objectives are, and he and his generals are doing exactly what they have to do to achieve those objectives. And anybody in the West who thinks that is not what is happening, they're not dealing with reality either.
yeah. Well, I'll finally say if you really look at the context of the two speeches and compare them, it's quite a striking difference. So I think that's a wrap for us, George.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so
Okay. Well, yeah, I think Putin is miles above Biden, that's for sure, and most of the Western leaders. And I guess with that, we have to say a bientôt, bis bald, see you soon, das Korova, das Vidania, au revoir, auf Wiedersehen, goodbye.